Undertone. What might just be the first found audio movie. And oh boy, it's time to buckle up, and honestly, there's probably going to be moments of this video where I'm jumping in different locations because my notes feel like they were also haunted by something because they start getting slanted and weird at some point, and I need to see the movie again to fact check some things. But Undertone ends up being this perfect blend of religious horror, folklore, and online horror. I urge you to see this somewhere with the best audio possible to really just let it all settle in, because it'll be moments and shots that have traditionally been used to set up jump scare that are just adding to this atmosphere that's gonna like get in the back of your head. Slow centered camera pans from behind, noise canceling headphones blocking out all outside sound. Viscerally scratching at something in your brain because you just so desperately want her to be paying more attention, and you don't want your noise canceled. You want to be able to hear what's going on around her, but you can't. It's dread. It's the feeling in the back of your neck when your basic instincts are screaming that something's not right. Because this movie is evil. Before getting into specifics, a no-spoiler rundown. Evie co-hosts a paranormal podcast with her friend Justin, deep-diving tales from around the world and the internet. While she's the skeptic of the two, never really believing the different phenomenon that they go over, things do start getting progressively unsettling around her after a series of mysterious recordings land in their inbox. Each one more ominous than the last. And this is another example of fine Canadian cinema. We are truly on a tear-up right now. Whatever you could want, we have available to you. Do you want comedy? We have Nirvana the band, the show, the movie. Do you want gay hockey players? We have Shorzy and Heated Rivalry. Do you want to feel like you're inviting evil into your home? You have Undertone. We also have Mile End Kicks, which is delightful. And just from that premise alone, this was instantly up my alley. It premiered at Fantasia Fest as The Undertone, and they dropped the and the capital U because it's cleaner that way. But also by dropping the capital on the U and the N become interchangeable, so when you spin them backwards, they're the same, which they used in the title screen, and it goes so hard. And one of my biggest complaints about a lot of the movies that are trying to engage with like different aspects of online culture or just like online communities in that way, it doesn't actually seem like they have the actual respect for it. So I am starving for movies that do it well and where you can really tell that the creator has an understanding and a love for what they're trying to do. Then on the other hand, Sundance has movies like Spree that seem to perfectly understand what aspect of a culture it's trying to bring to life and clearly loves it. And a tradition this Sundance got to continue with this movie. And Ian Tuason, the writer-director, was originally planning this to be an online-style podcast horror before he was able to turn it into a full movie with more fleshed out elements, just kind of based on other things happening in his life. And you can tell that he's of that culture. You can tell that he understands a creepypasta, which I realize sounds silly, but like some of the most horrifying online things find themselves on those different creepypasta message boards. And you can tell that he respects the unique ways that whole culture has been able to spread horror around the world. You can tell that it makes him scared too. He's done a lot of work with VR, so the whole atmosphere of this movie is super dialed in because of that and because of how important that would be to a VR landscape. So I'm just fully engaged the entire time. I took a screenshot of what my heart rate was doing during the movie because I knew that it was like spiking a lot while watching the movie just because it was so tense, just waiting to see what would happen next. And something else that makes me tense is thinking about all the data brokers who are selling my personal information online. But thanks to today's sponsor, Incogni, we can bring that heart rate right back down. One of the most valuable things we have right now is our personal data. And that's why people are constantly trying to exploit it. And not just your information, they can make detailed profiles that include your family members' information too. If you're lucky, this will just lead to an influx of spam, but every day people are coming up with more sophisticated ways to use this information against you and your loved ones. Especially in the US, where people searching sites are popping up constantly to create detailed personal profiles for anyone to search. You might feel equipped to spot these scams, but can you say the same about all of your family members? And that's where Incogni comes in. They'll scan the web for places that have your information and send requests on your behalf to have it removed. And if you happen to notice your information somewhere before Incogni can get to it, you can put in a custom request. But usually anytime I start noticing an uptick in scam calls and emails, if I check my Incogni dashboard, they are already working on a fresh batch of requests without me needing to do a thing. And it can be that easy for you too. Just make an account, give Incogni the okay to work on your behalf, and they'll keep you updated as they handle that back and forth stress-free. So check out Incogni.com/Amanda or use code Amanda at checkout to get 60% off an annual plan and let Incogni take care of the headaches of data removal. Back to the video. And to make it all even creepier, they have an ARG component, which I've talked about in a couple other movies most recently. I mentioned it for Bring Her Back. by the Philippou brothers. So it's basically just something engaging with the movie as if like what's happening in the movie is real. I always love those. I think they're a great idea, but honestly, this movie creeped me out so much that I didn't even want to engage with the ARG site once I realized what it was doing, because I just didn't want to let that evil in. I, of course, did end up letting that evil in, and I'll talk about it at the end of the video for a bit. I talk about it now, but it definitely has stuff that would be considered spoilers for the movie, so we shall wait. Now, so I don't set up any kind of false expectations. This is not a big jump scare horror. It's not violent. It's not showy, but because of how well it's using that soundscape and the environment of the house, it really does just itch that primitive part of your brain that just lets you know that there's just something not right. And that just keeps building throughout the movie. You don't know if there's certain sounds that are happening in an audio file they're listening to, or if it's happening in the house, and she doesn't know either sometimes. This might be a little bit too much of a slow burn for some, but this is the kind of thing that if this was just popping up on the internet, I would have been up all night trying to like dig into every mystery about it and find every piece of information. So I would have been desperate for all pieces of information. Some people are really not into it though, and that's okay. I will try to go over some of those bigger issues as we go, or more likely in the end when I can get into like the full spoilers. So I was lucky enough to get a few minutes to talk with Ian and the two main actors, Nina Kiri and Adam DiMarco. So we will have some of that footage in here to help flesh out some of that storytelling. But we're going to dive into full spoilers here because there's just so much of the lore in this that I want to be able to get in there and lay out fully. So I really urge you to go check out this movie before watching this video if you're at all interested in it. Because we start with rasped and rattled breath and a demented version of Baa Baa Black Sheep sung by children. You know that makes things scary right off the bat. The eerie voices of young children, that's a cheat code. Cutting to a kettle boiling, and it's just this assault of sound until Evie puts on her noise-canceling headphones, which becomes its own different type of sinister because you want to hear what's going on around you. When you start losing senses in a horror movie, you just start feeling tense. You get those lingering shots from behind the head, the dark corners that'll have you wondering if there's something hiding in them. But the horrors haven't even started yet. We get a quick rundown on who she is before they actually start recording the podcast. She's back living at home, taking care of her dying mother. She's got no real outside support. A boyfriend she doesn't super seem to care about. This guy, Justin, is a longtime, very close friend who just doesn't live near her anymore, and they just have this podcast together now. A podcast where, as mentioned, she is the skeptic and Justin is the true believer. They talk about this video they'd gone over in a previous episode that it was called like the I Feel Wonderful video that was making people kill themselves after watching it. And today they've got something special. A mysterious email hit the inbox with 10 audio recordings apparently made by a couple where the guy Mike is trying to prove to his girlfriend Jessa that she's been talking in her sleep. So he thinks it'll be a good idea to record so he can play it back for her, and it just gets weird, like her singing things like London Bridge, just another children's song with sinister origins. Like there's a myth that children were sacrificed and potentially even buried alive in the foundation of the bridge, and if that didn't happen, the bridge would collapse. It's definitely not as delightful as Fergie made it sound. The email itself is also very weird and kind of cryptic. There's this thing of atonement and tenet. And Justin's pretty excited for this one. It ends up leading back into this conversation about nursery rhymes, what they mean, and how they are largely a product of children suffering for the choices of adults. The recordings start out pretty basic, but they do get a little bit more eerie as they go in these first three ones. And by the time they get to the third recording, Evie starts thinking she's hearing things around the house. Like there's a thudding that starts in the recording that she can't tell if it's actually happening around her at the same time, so they decide to postpone finishing the recording until another day. Nothing too freaky though, depending on where those thuds were happening in the audio. If you're listening to like spatial, noise canceling headphones, it could make sense that it could sound like it's actually right next to you. But you may have noticed that the light in the kitchen went out in this moment when no one else was in the house. And then a light upstairs goes on. The mom has been completely unconscious the entire time. She hasn't been able to talk to her mom. It really is just a waiting for her to die game at this point. She's got that ragged breathing that we heard in the intro of the movie. So she couldn't have turned it on, which Evie just kind of ignores, which makes sense at this stage. And it's like she's just really hoping that her mom might come out of this. And because she can't talk, they find a way to kind of build the relationship between them, or explain kind of the dynamic by using a voicemail where her mom was inviting Evie to mass. So you're setting up that religious angle to the story that Evie's clearly like rejected once she got older and wasn't spending much time around her mom anymore, before it cuts to her puking in a toilet, quickly confirming that she is pregnant, and they'll later find out that the woman in the recordings is also pregnant. She hasn't told her boyfriend about it yet, who mostly just begs her to come to a party because all she does right now is take care of her mom, and by the time she gets back the next day, the mom, who again is not conscious or moving, is somehow on the floor. Now obviously Evie's just feeling this immense guilt for something happening the one night she chooses to leave her mom alone, but to us, us, knowing we're watching a horror movie, it feels a little bit more sinister. It's also worth noting that Evie is absolutely isolated in this life right now. I get that she went out and had an experience with her boyfriend, but she's definitely not sharing aspects of her life with him and doesn't really seem to care about him that much. And because we can't leave the house the one time she does, we are literally trapped in all this with her. Really setting up that caretaker fatigue guilt and Catholic guilt that so much of this story is hinging on. This is also when Evie starts to notice the statue that seems to be the Virgin Mary-like individual screaming with children climbing up her. It is unsettling. We will find out it's a different religious figure, so she hides it away, where we get our first glimpse of this very creepy crayon drawing. Before they had ended the previous recording, Evie had asked Justin to send her the Baba Black Sheep song in reverse, and she thinks she hears something that says like lick the blood off before again hearing those thumping noise starting up. A faucet starts running by itself and just like progressively just more unsettling things start happening around the house, but she is of course not really connecting that to anything. Why would she? She's a skeptic. Maybe it's just old plumbing. But then she also notices the statue back on the bedside table. Absolutely not. I think deep down she really wants to believe that her mom's having mild moments of consciousness, but nope. This time she sticks it in the closet. We get this other layer where the stress of it all pushes her to have a drink, something that we know from Justin that she shouldn't be doing. Not because she's pregnant, he doesn't know that yet, but because she used to have a drinking problem. Back to the podcast though, they keep going through the recordings where a lot of parallels seem to be happening to what Evie's experiencing in the house, and that banging just keeps waking them up every night. But Justin thinks he hears something else before the banging starts. Evie thinks it's an artifact. Then they just get to Jessica sleep talking louder and louder. It seems like mumbled gibberish, and again seems to deeply affect Evie. So they break again for another day when Evie again notices the lights going crazy in her mom's room. Something easy enough for her to logic away with a wiring issue in the house. The next day, Evie tries to clean up that artifact they both heard in the audio. Again, it just sounds like gibberish until she reverses it and it seems to be summoning something. I don't even want to say the words out loud because I don't want to accidentally summon something here. And Evie's just out here repeating it, trying to sound things out. Because it seems like that's exactly what Evie did. We get this very dramatic camera fly down the stairs, flying right to the clock about to hit 3 a.m. as lamps start to flicker. And then it cuts to the mom downstairs clicking before Evie gasps awake at the computer and shows the clock strike 3:01. A moment of initial torment as things start to take hold. So we get back to the podcasting. Evie's just furiously doodling away with crayons as Justin also realizes that the audio seems to be Jessica frantically summoning something called Abazu. And Abazu is an actual religious figure. In the movie, she's described as a woman who would kill the children of other women that she envied because she couldn't have her own. And that envy was so strong that it carried over into death, making her a demon that causes miscarriages and stillborn babies. Oh no! The lore continued with Sikyor locals believing that Abazu entered this statue of Saint Rita Cassia, the patron saint of cursed mothers. I don't think that's actually her real official patron title in reality, but it's the general sentiment of her patronage. And that statue that keeps popping up in Evie's mom's room, apparently based on Saint Rita of Cassia. And it just seems like it's like the incarnation of that statue that has been possessed by Abazu, and that's why there's all these like horrific babies crawling up her and she's just screaming in horror. As an extreme fan of lore, I am into this. Back to the recordings, which again are fully escalating. Jessica's starting to see things in her sleepwalking, like a baby in a sink, but the audio actually has a baby's cry, but their baby isn't born yet. And now they're on file 8 with more banging and Baba Black Sheep playing, and it happens to be the exact same version that Justin had found and sent to Evie earlier, and again, more baby crying. So it's around here that Justin decides to maybe try to get more information from the person who actually sent them the recordings, but the email bounces, the address isn't found. But that's also when Justin notices that the email address was Come In Abazu spelled backwards. Look, I know I said I wasn't gonna say it. I have changed location strategically to avoid being attacked, but I realized that the demon lady's after one thing, and I will never have that for her. She's got nothing to do with me. That takes the power away. I'm still a little nervous, but the power is gone. Also, I was at Sundance going around chanting Uzeba a lot, so that's which is Abazu backwards. So I think the ship has sailed for potential possession. If it's gonna happen, I've welcomed it. I don't welcome it, though. I don't welcome it. So when he looks up Come In Abazu spelled backwards, he comes across a study of 2 patients who were obsessed with it specifically spelled backwards. One drowned her own daughter, and the other made hundreds of statues of dead babies to give away to women before killing herself when she was 5 months pregnant. Oh no! Dude, if Justin knew Evie was cooking up a little baby in there, he'd be shutting this shit down so fast. He would be on a plane from London. Oh yeah, I don't know if I've specifically mentioned that. She is in Canada, which is why when she's recording, it's almost always like like late at night going to 3 a.m. and he's recording before he goes into work because he's overseas. Fully understand why people have an issue with him constantly stopping the podcast, but they do really kind of point out it's not normal for them, and it's just happening because Evie's mental torment is just kind of getting worse the more she's listening to the files as it hits like 3 a.m. It's also really important to have these breaks so you can see the level of constant care that Evie needs to have over her mother. But as weird as everything's starting to get, Evie just has to continue denying it and is like, no, we're absolutely going to keep going with these episodes even when Justin wants to stop. They're going to do crazy numbers. This is going to do so good. And that is why numbers are the death of us all. But I do this, so here we are. So they decided to split the episodes into 2 parts, release what they've done so far now, and then they finish it up next week, which will actually give them the chance to have viewer call-ins about the subject, which I actually think is a very fun idea. If it wasn't so horrifying, I'm like, absolutely, get that viewer data. But not before more scary shit happens around the house. She goes up to check on her mother. Closet door, slightly ajar. Closet light, turns on by itself. Comatose mother sits up and looks at her from the bed. I'm done. And I've seen this like 3 or 4 times now, and I'm still in this moment. I'm done. I'm like, ooh, I'm looking at a bed over there, and I'm like, gah. I know it's coming, and it still gets me for some reason. It's like my mind and my body can just tap into those feelings I had when I watched it for the first time, and I realized that I'm like a seasoned horror watcher. So many of you are like, oh, I watch your channel because I can't watch horror movies until I know what's going to happen, or you let me engage with media because you're not afraid. But like something about this, I'm like, even right now, I'm like, I get the tingles, and I've seen things that are technically scarier. I've experienced more horrifying things, but there is just something about this movie. So even with all the weird things happening around the house, Evie's fucked up nightmares, hearing what is clearly her mother praying, but when she opens the door, it's just the same ragged breathing. She's still just fully in denial, and in some cases, even worse, thinks that her mom is kind of like maybe coming out of it every now and again, to the point that she's getting mad at her for not talking once she opens the door. She is ignoring all of these warning signs to hope that something positive can actually change in the mom, because I think she feels a lot of guilt for kind of separating herself from her mother over the years, and now she's dying.
She's just in denial. This is just a person who can't handle everything that's happening, so she has to deflect it in some way, and she kind of continues to deny until the nightmare takes over her, which I think is what happens in real life too, when you can't ever get to facing something that's happening.
But then there's something that happens, and there has been a lot of debate as to like what might have been going on through this entire movie or in this moment. But when Evie leaves the room after she thinks she hears the mom talking, her breathing actually stops. So I'm pretty sure she dies here, and that everything kind of happening after this is something else inhabiting the mother's body. I think Abazu is kind of like starting to take hold of the body. Might be wrong, but I did double check with the subtitles, and it specifically says breathing stops. Evie doesn't notice though, and it is now time to close out episode 2, the last 2 recordings, with again Evie just violently scribbling away with these crayons. Okay, that's so crazy. My nose just started like bleeding. Let's continue. The 9th recording has Jessica panicking over a sleep paralysis demon that was making fun of her for praying before the audio completely glitches out. Then while Justin's trying to fix it, he notices that his computer is actually displaying 20 to 3, but again, he's in London, so it's supposed to be 20 to 9. We're ramping into the endgame, people. They get their first caller, who happens to be in the same area code as Evie, and is claiming that Mike and Jessa were his neighbors, and they were found dead with bags on their head at the bottom of the stairs, and dead babies drawn all over the walls. Before they can ask him for more details, though, his phone line cuts out, and they get a caller from someone else from San Diego telling the story of a woman who used to rent the basement of their house when she was a child, always playing music in reverse before she was arrested for killing her baby. How she killed that baby, you might ask? Well, the family started hearing loud banging coming from the vents, and it turns out that the woman was beating a garbage bag against the furnace with her baby inside it. Holy shit, that's what the thudding's building to. That is what the thudding's building to. And that story is from when this caller was a kid, and again, in San Diego, so it's really showing that, much like one would assume from these stories that started in ancient times, it has been spreading around the world, is going on for years. And now it seems to be catching rides in audio files. And I just love that. For some reason, I've always found that to be the scariest thing, that these like horrible phenomenon and demon and like paranormal or supernatural things can happen, and they just kind of go around at random. But with modern technology, we can unintentionally capture pieces of them and spread them around more with like video cameras and audio. Honestly, probably the same reason why Marble Hornets got to me so badly when I first saw that. As you might expect, Justin's pretty freaked out by it all, and Evie just thinks it's people who want to hear their voice on a podcast, and forces him to play the 10th And final file, where Jess is just repeating,
"She's listening. She's listening. I need to warn her."
As if she's transcending time and space to know that Evie's listening and needs to be stopped, but at this point it's too late. We flash up to the mom's room to show that the closet door is wide open with the light on again. Banging in the audio file that Evie's now positive must be coming from above her in the house. With the recording ending with Jessa saying,
"Look, and lick all the blood off now."
Just what Evie heard in the reversed version of Papa Black Sheep. I know I'm like restrained yelling, but I'm in a thin-walled Airbnb and trying not to get kicked out. Rest assured, internally I'm like, ah. And just like that, the file stops. It won't play anymore as the clock strikes 3, then back.
We should stop listening.
Too late for that now, girl! Justin's obviously getting really panicked. The audio starts up by itself again. It's Baba Black Sheep in reverse. Jess is screaming. The sound of a baby crying. Again, her baby hasn't been born yet. And then you hear Jess saying, "Justin, I'm so cold." Not Mike, I'm so cold. Justin, I'm so cold. Brief moment where Evie thinks that Justin set this whole thing up to mess with her, but like, come on, that guy's this little sweetie pie. At this point, they don't even give us time to consider that though, because they get another call with someone just progressively asking for someone named Mary. They want to know a Mary, which is the name that Evie's planning to give to her unborn child. Then another call.
"You shouldn't have called out to her."
Look, I know that demon voices get to people, but there really is just something about this, like, just giddy girl voice that is actually much more sinister to me. I also want you all to know that while I was, like, writing this last night, I started hearing clicking from the hallway, kind of like the clicking that the mom's body keeps seeming to do at random. Not okay. And yes, because they've listened to the 10th file, any hope at salvation is done now. Yes, obviously things have been ramping through the movie. It's like a slow possession process, and it's just that like once you actually get to that last file, all hope's gone. And the entire time that Evie's listening to this call happening, her mom, or what I presume to be the corpse of the mom possessed now, is like floating towards her in the darkness. Oh my god! Why did I keep watching this movie and writing the video at night? Then another call comes in, and this time it seems to be a concerned and guilty sounding woman. She's named Abby, and she's asking for help with her baby crying in the background. Abby, you say? Well, that would be a cute little nickname for Abazoo. So with context clues, it seems pretty clear that this woman is probably going to kill her baby because she doesn't know what to do. And I think that alone kind of in a vacuum is a really interesting look at just kind of how some women start feeling during like postpartum. They feel hopeless, and because they feel so hopeless and just conflicted with the fact that they can't get the baby to stop crying and the baby seems so unhappy that they just seem like a bad person. And then in obviously this situation, something is pushing them to extreme lengths where they end up like murdering the child. I'm not obviously saying like, let's condone the people who murder children. Obviously that's taking it to the horror levels of extreme, but I just kind of thought that it felt very poignant in that way, just the desperation in her voice. Now, Evie 100% believing that this is a real caller is trying to reason with this person's guilt because she's got a lot of guilt in herself too, before saying that she killed her own mother. Not in a literal sense. I know that the way it's worded, because like right after she says, "I killed my mother, my mommy," she says like, "when I was a kid," or "when I was a child." Some people are like, yeah, she said she killed her mom when she was a child. And it's like, no, she said she killed her mother. And then she kind of starts telling an anecdote from like when she was a child, this stuff started building through her life. And she started kind of like moving away from the church, which then made her pull back from her mom more and the things that would have brought her mom peace. And then her mom gets sick and is just begging with her to pray because that's what would bring her peace. And then because, for Evie, because she wouldn't do that with her mom, whether prayer itself actually does anything, it does help lift the spirits of people who believe in it, which in that alone can help people when they're unwell. At least it brings up their spirits. It helps with their resolve, like all sorts of just like positive thought has been proven to help in that way. So because she pulled away from her mother so extensively and then is now just here at the end when she's really dying, Evie has all this guilt and really does blame herself for the fact that the mom's dying, because whether she literally is what led her to die, which she's not, she got sick, she feels responsible for killing a piece of her mother that could have contributed to that. In my opinion, some people watch this movie thinking that the mom was actually dead the entire movie, and that like a lot of this is just like her processing the grief in some weird way, which I'm not going to discount. The beauty of parts of this movie kind of being very, not vague, but not ultra specific, means that you can go crazy with a bunch of really fun theories if you want to. And maybe I'm wrong and you are right. But yeah, I'm going with the interpretation that she feels like she contributed contributed to her mother's spirit dying, which then contributed to her kind of losing this battle with her illness. Again, this is religious trauma and Catholic guilt combined with caretaker fatigue that makes Evie think she's both responsible for where her mother is and doing everything wrong with her day to day. So in a lot of other movies, when characters kind of have this moment where they really reveal this big thing about themselves, this big insecurity, that Evie's finally acknowledging this guilt she feels and why it's playing into all this denial she's felt throughout the movie, is usually maybe when like there's a glimmer of hope that something can happen. But no, it's not that kind of movie, because Abby starts laughing. Because that's an Abazoo possession right on in there. And that laughter just continues as the thudding starts up and we know that it's the sound of a baby being swung into a wall. Brutal! So now Abazoo's really come out to play. We got the TV turning on and starts playing the I Feel Wonderful video without the TV even being plugged in. Some people were like, oh, was it actually all connected to that video and Evie not believing in it? In my opinion, it is actually Abazoo tormenting her with this thing that she laughed at Justin for because he believed it at the beginning of the movie and now it's being like thrown back on you and being like, look at your skepticism now. It pans back over to the podcasting setup where you notice that like the microphone's been pushed out of the way, the laptop's gone, and the all the scribbles she'd been doing are now put together to show it's a big drawing of Abazoo holding up the dead baby, a larger scale version of the smaller piece of artwork that she found in her mom's drawer. It keeps panning around while light bulbs are just like popping off all around. The mom's wheelchair is now at the front door. The religious items all start disappearing from the wall and on top of the piano. It starts to pan up the stairs to reveal that there's now just a bunch of dead babies drawn all over it in the crayon before it gets us into the mom's room to show us that she's not in the bed and the bed is just perfectly made with that damn statue just sitting in the center. So I can get why some people are like, oh, I think the mom was actually dead the entire time because now it's showing. But then you see the mom in the closet standing and then starts walking very fast backwards at Evie. Then the light's completely cut, removing any of our connection visually and leaving us just with the audio of this thudding, this screaming, and that we think that the mother has potentially like attacked her now because there's a whole possession thing going on before Evie starts saying that she's cold the same way that we heard Jessa saying it, as if she was just pantomiming something from the future that hadn't happened yet in Evie, who then starts chanting "Come in, Abazoo" in reverse as the sound of the baby's crying continues, with Evie's voice being blended with that more demonic register, implying full possession. And then you got a bunch of flashes at one point with like her being suffocated with the bag on her head, implying that she will probably experience a very similar fate as the people that they heard about in the phone calls. Now I can see why that ending might not be satisfying for a lot of people, but I really think for me, just how evil the whole thing felt as a whole, it just really gripped my brain. I was locked in and I felt like they gave us enough information throughout the movie to kind of infer what was going to happen and know that it was just kind of this like horrifying ending. Sure, maybe if they had a bigger budget, they could have gone for like a little bit more of a big ending where you see all of the crazy stuff happening to Evie, but I do kind of like the fact that it just really does kind of remain almost like a haunted audio in its conclusion. So I'm just going to talk about some of those different theories or different complaints I've seen and just kind of like weigh in on what I think was happening in terms of what different themes might mean. So I know that a lot of people were like, well, what happened to Justin? Was he just left and was he fine? Like at one point he just says there's nothing he can do and he kind of goes. To me, it was pretty obvious that like, you know, Justin's not pregnant or living with someone who is pregnant or got anyone pregnant. I think that they've clearly laid out in this movie and all the lore around it that Abazoo is only interested in women who are pregnant or who have young children to torment them. So Justin is probably fine. If Justin had been in the house with them, he probably would have gotten roped into it, but he's in London, traumatized. I also saw some people being like, well, why would they introduce this boyfriend for her to have if he's not even going to be present? But again, I feel like that's extremely intentional and ties into the story very directly. We have Evie's isolation, the way that she's really kind of like pulled back to try to like deal with her mother here. And obviously they've shown that the boyfriend is not super supportive. He's not very reliable. And we know that he's not a source of care and comfort for her with everything she's been dealing with her mom. Him not being around is actually perfectly surfacing the story. Even when you take it that step further, when you have a lot of women who get pregnant and then feel like they're alone, like they can't rely on the person that it happened with, and the inner struggle and all the turmoil with that, like there are so many layers as to why him not really being around and just kind of being like, oh, I never see you anymore, come to a party, versus like can I like bring you food while you're taking care of your mother, is very relevant and makes the story better, in my opinion. Then there were the complaints that I kind of echoed in some ways, where it kind of feels like the stuff going on with like the demon wanting, the envious demon killing babies and the mothers and tormenting them, not fully tying into like this end of life care thing with the mom. But I do think it's speaking to this larger idea of like parenthood, caretaking, motherhood, not wanting to end up in the same position as your parent and not make the same mistakes you felt they made, but then also feeling guilt for the ways you could have been better. This one specifically ties directly into Catholic guilt and the feeling so many caretakers have that things will be easier when the person you're caring for dies, which is also causing you guilt. To me, I really think it just cycles back into those words that were in the body of the email: atonement and tenet. One side is making up for something you feel you've done wrong and have guilt over, and then tenet is that, you know, living with these beliefs and the belief structure. And because, you know, the more Evie's denying this truth of the things that are going on around her, the more she's actively being punished. All really tying back into those themes with the children's songs about how they're suffering for the sins and mistakes of the adults around them, and the desperation you might feel to try to change those things that you feel you've done or didn't do. So much of Evie denying the reality of the things amplifying her around her are linked to this desire to undo the things that she failed to do, like when she got really mad that she thought she heard her mom praying, and then she goes in the room and it's like nothing's changed. She is so desperate for something to change there so she doesn't have to feel the guilt she's experiencing, whether it's right for her to be feeling that guilty or not. So instead of that final admission of the guilt be the thing that kind of frees her from everything going on, it's actually the one thing that the last thing that Abizu needed to really fully take hold. I saw a lot of people saying that they got a very strong pro-life message from this movie, but I really saw it again as just tying into Catholic guilt. That whether something's true or not, pre-existing conditioning and upbringing will affect aspects of your life long after you feel like you've left it behind. Evie's considering having an abortion, but then probably starts seeing that as a way that maybe she could bring her mom back. The guilt that she's feeling towards her mom is going to tie into something that she was raised to think was wrong, not that she still thinks it's wrong. As if, despite all odds, this might be the thing that changes the scenario, that maybe it'll solve some of the guilt she's had. Again, guilt she doesn't need to feel. Technically, her getting an abortion would have actually stopped all the horrors from happening here. There wouldn't have been anything for Abizu to want anymore. So to me, it really was just tapping into that idea of like religious trauma and how it lingers and how long it can affect you. I'm not saying that every theme lines up as clean as it should or could, but I do feel like it was doing a really good job expressing that idea of caretaker fatigue, Catholic guilt, blending in the constant fear that you're doing something wrong. That kind of religious trauma really does warp your perception. She can't get away from that guilt because she is trapped in this house, surrounded with reminders of it, whether she believes it now or not. As Tuason put it in relation to caring for his own parents at the end of their lives, it's that the terror you feel in those situations is real, whether it exists outside you as a supernatural force or a psychological one. Blending that idea of literal possession with a less literal possession, that being a full-time caretaker really does take over your life. You don't have the same autonomy, which we see in Evie. If it does turn out that this guy's just trying to make a bunch of pro-life propaganda, that would obviously suck. But it wasn't the vibe I got while watching it, while fully understanding that other people's personal experiences will have them reacting to this in a different way. The most I saw was that the death of Tuason's parents led him to a different place in his own relationship with God, not religion, but God. He's openly said that he essentially tried to turn Catholicism into its own type of folklore in this movie, and it's religion, not God as a concept, that becomes a major antagonist and the thing that Evie can't escape. So the ARG site has some pretty creepy stuff. I found it while searching the demon's name backwards because of course I chose to do that, which led me to a site that they set up for the podcast where the demon itself is commenting a series of links. The first one is the video they mentioned at the beginning of the movie, the I Feel Wonderful video that could make people kill themselves after watching, which just has a flash frame at some point that says, "What follows mother? Hated that." Then the next one is a link to this like record of children singing a series of nursery rhymes that can be played backwards if you hit R. But the creepiest, you can talk to the damn demon. Is this Abizu?
Yes, it is. Hello, are you there?
Nope. No, I'm not. Goodbye. And if you ask it about the dark, it spits out a website page where you can put in a password to have more backwards nursery rhymes played for you. Does not spark joy, but also it does a little bit. I love an ARG component to a horror movie. This stuff is so fun. It's actually my favorite part of the original Cloverfield movie. There is technically a contest embedded in the website to win free tickets to see the movie, but I assume that might have expired by the time this video goes live, but it's still super cool. I also need to point out that while they were filming this movie, weird things were happening in the house, which is actually actually director Ian Tuasan's like childhood home, where at one point he was actually caring for his dying parents. There were like lights flickering when they were recording. People would think they were hearing voices, but then someone would show up and they'd be like, did you just get here? I thought you were talking to me like a long time ago. Unfortunately, I ran out of time in my interview because I think Adam actually had like a potential story about what might have been happening or what he was experiencing in the house. And I unfortunately got the like wrap up thing. I had to cut it short, but there was apparently really weird things happening around the house. And it's cool though. They saged the place. It's fine now, but like maybe that's why it feels so evil. But I think that's pretty much going to do it for the video. I have a lot of other thoughts that'll probably be plugged in other places. When I was originally working on this, it's when it was in theaters and I only had my memory of what I saw back in January because I couldn't get to it at South by Southwest. So I've now seen it again. So I'm going to be plugging in some other footage of me here earlier in the video, which might feel weird, but that's why. But let me know what you guys are thinking down below. Do you think the mom was dead the entire time? I think there was a couple things that suggested that this might have been the case. Is there something really cool you noticed that I missed? Did it also just seep into your brain the same way it seeped into mine? Let me know down below, but that is going to do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.